There we go. Okay, so Gloria, for the minutes, the commissioners present are Alvin, Brian, Dave, Jane, and Ray.
Thank you.
So let me pull this up on the screen. You guys got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So tonight's topics are conservation subdivisions and open space. And let me start off the bat with a correction to my own logic. I had in the first go round reordered them so that conservation subdivisions led open space. I was reading it again this afternoon, and I actually think it has to go back to that original order. Although I do still think there's modifications within the open space section that will essentially elevate conservation subdivisions conceptually. And later on, I think we should talk about moving the whole section up in the outline to make those topics more important. And I bring that up just to mention that I'm going to scroll down to open space first, and then we'll come back here. So, okie dokie, let me move this window. Okay. Oh, here comes Dan Malo as well. All right. So section 6, open space. First comment off the bat is one from Alvin. As it currently is written, all subdivisions of 4 lots or more approved under these regulations shall preserve areas of open space in perpetuity. The consistent comment there is, should it be 3 lots or more, since that is what constitutes a subdivision. And I noticed earlier today as I was scrolling down, and I'll just briefly again zip ahead and then zip back. Somewhere down here, it refers to some stuff in the statutes which started with 5 lots for the consideration of open space. And I want to find that.
Could you have put them 5 lots on there because that's what it said for the driveways earlier?
I don't think so in this case. It was something that I saw as I was looking through it this afternoon to reacclimate myself to this, and it stood out. And of course, now I can't find it.
It's 4 lots.
Oh, here it is. It's under the open space waiver section. And it refers to transfer of all land in a subdivision of less than 5 lots. And this is referencing chapter 126, section 8-25. So I wonder if 5 lots is the statutory threshold for open space requirements. So I just
Let me look in our book.
Yeah, if you could take a look at that, Alvin, and I'm just going to go back up to the top with the open space section, because that could be the answer to your initial question. Let me know when you find it.
Yep. Page 43. It's quite lengthy. Let me look through it first.
Okay, so let's come back to that when you find it.
Yep.
I'm just going to drop this note here in case we can't resolve it tonight. At the very least, I can look at it again in the office. Okay. All right. So this is all fairly straightforward, and I don't think we had any contention with what land dedicated as open space should be for. And this is the current requirement in Thompson, which is that the base requirement is 20%. I don't think anybody had any issues there. Types of open space, fairly.
Tara, this may be a really dumb question,
Surely not.
but as I look at this with you know, entire open space concept as it relates to housing, HOAs, private land, I'm struggling with the purposes here are for use or playgrounds, parks. There's not gonna be a lot of access to some of the proposed subdivisions that we're gonna see in the future as this is being rewritten. So maybe it's just an open statement or something to ponder, but it seems like this open space is more geared towards public roads or public subdivisions, or cul-de-sacs, right?
Well, I would say in this text that we're looking at here, that it's fundamentally as it's currently constituted with whatever edits we've made in the first pass. And therefore, yes, all of that language essentially assumes that dedicate, or nearly all of that language assumes that dedication involves some kind of public easement. And I think that with the introduction of, or at least the further articulation of possibilities for lands being maintained in association, yeah, some of them probably won't be publicly accessible, but those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I guess it's a philosophical question, right? Is the point of the open space the space or the public access to the space? And I think that you can have both of those things, or you can have it so that it is the space plus private access. If it's in perpetuity, you have preserved that land from development, whether it is for a limited set of users or an open set of users. And therefore, the landscape, the integrity of the landscape is further protected. Does that make sense?
It does.
And that there could be reasons to do either, right? I'm sure that we're going to see occasions where, and I would actually guess more often than not, you're going to see occasions where that is going to be suggested as a permanent easement favoring the town. But in some cases, you're going to see it where it's, held as common space. Actually, I can, without referring to the specific parcel, because I don't want to say anything prejudicial, I actually have a concept that's coming up in front. It's going to be coming to you guys soon, but right now it's sort of been at that sort of discussion stage with me in my office, where both of those things are included on the same parcel. So there is stuff that will definitely have public access, and then there's a smaller portion which is being proposed for preservation, which would only have access for the residents, and that's just because of the way the land is configured. So you can see, let's imagine something totally hypothetical. Let's imagine a parcel that butted up to the airline trail, right, which is public land. And part of what would be proposed could be that the lands that were adjacent to the airline trail would also have public access, but that there would be within the ring of the house lots an area that was kept as an open field or a community garden or something for the residents of that development. So there is room for both there. Right, just as a hypothetical.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess what I struggle with is how can I explain this too? So let's say it's a cul-de-sac, say like the one down at Bonnet Acres where we had, where, people wanted to buy the open space, or, it approached the selectmen to buy the open space. So just imagine that was connected to a road, but let's say the open space of a private subdivision is to the rear of the subdivision, right? That made the most sense. How do you deed that so that it's conveyed to the town, but without an easement to get to the land? So you need to.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yes. That is a good question, and I will have to think about the logistics of that. It's not something I think I can answer, although we can certainly, hash it out here. And let me drop a note in there somewhere.
I know it brings up a whole host of questions, but if the goal is to, it's everyone's goal, right? To have open space, to preserve the land that we have, right?
Yep.
If there's going to be a subdivision, as we've seen in the past, we want to keep some of that land either open to the public or to keep it natural. But there needs to be some sort of legal means to keep that natural if that's what we're telling them they need to do. I just don't know what that is. And that's what I struggle with as you look, public, obviously it's easier. Public road, public, it could be deeded with an access. But
I have a question. As you're talking, Dave, a few things have popped into my head. Okay, so we're going to subdivision, portion of that land has to be given to the town basically as open space, correct?
I'm sorry, Jane, I was typing while you were talking. Give me 1 second to finish this note and then ask your question again.
Go ahead. Let me know when you're ready.
It would be conveyed to the town, Jane.
It would be conveyed to the town. Okay. This is a question because I'm not sure. What if down the road, 10 years from now, the town decides to do something with that open space? Is that something that they can do?
It depends on how the easement is constructed or the land is dedicated. This list of types of open space to be dedicated does indicate things which would qualify to be open space. And some of that would be raw or natural land. Some of it would be specifically for recreational purposes. And that would be indicated on the deed.
No, I get that. I understand that. My question is, it's conveyed to the town, but like say 10 years, 5 years down the road, the town decides they want to do something with that land that was conveyed to them. Will they have the right to do that?
If it's permanently dedicated as open space, it would have to fall within an open space use. I think that's the closest I can get to an answer.
And that's not, that's totally not answering my question. I want to know whether the town would have the right to do what they wanted to with that open space. I mean, I'm looking at all these things that we are going over and doing and rewriting all of this stuff when, I mean, wasn't this done last year also? I mean, when you look at how many times these things have been revised, how many more times are they going to be revised? And how many more things are going to be changed? And my question is, literally, would the town be able to take an open space that has been conveyed to them and put in a development?
No,
Because they've, well, okay, let me ask you this. If they change the regulations, they'd be able to do that, wouldn't they?
no, not once the easement is recorded on the deed.
And they wouldn't be able to change any regulations or anything that would allow them to do that. I mean, obviously, we're changing regulations now.
Right. The town
Mhm.
does have the ability to change its regulations, but the whatever permit or plan or approval, something, whatever set of regulations something is approved under is what obtains. And in the case
Vera.
of an easement on the deed, that's recorded. So that remains in perpetuity.
And
Kira,
it can never be touched by the town to do something else other than what it was specified for.
That's correct.
Okay.
Alvin, go ahead.
Yes, in parentheses, please. Our regulations follow statute. Make things up, nor can the town make it up outside of what the statutory authorities is. Now,
Right.
looking at 8-25, the only thing that mentions anything about quantity, open space requirement of the section, that's 825,
Mhm.
shall not apply if the transfer of all land in a subdivision of I have to find out what statute means by parcels, is to a parent, child, brother, sister, grandparent, for no consideration.
So
Or-
that doesn't reference 5 lots.
other than 5 parcels. In 8.5. There's nothing that says anything exactly in 8.25 about 25 parcels.
Okay, so that goes back to our opening question. All subdivisions of 4 lots or more versus the fact that it's 3 lots that defines legally a subdivision.
As a subdivision, correct. But yes, all of this talks about 5 parcels.
So I guess, and it's, it's just, it's such a simple statement in some ways, but it
It
is a
is, but it
decision,
isn't.
right? Is it all
I think-
subdivisions and a subdivision is defined by 3 or more? Or is there a threshold of number of parcels at which open space comes into play? And that would be something that you would be deciding. This is how it currently is 4 lots or more. In other words, if you're subdividing 3 lots, we're not requiring you to put 20% aside as open space.
That's how I would read it.
Right, right. That's what it currently is. So your question, I assumed, was, should everything be at the same threshold starting at 3? I would say you probably have discretion to make that threshold for what qualifies to trigger open space higher, but do you want to?
Well, reading everything I can find in open space, including chapter 490, there's no reference to a minimum other than the maximum 25 acres has to be in forest land.
Right, and the 490 is a totally different
Precisely.
species. It's a different way of handling open space. 490 has nothing to do with permanent protection. It's a taxing strategy. So this
Right.
is about permanent protection of open space.
And I'm diligently reading chapter 203 in Connecticut's general statute here. Unfortunately, there are a lot of words to read.
I know, and they're written so
I have to read it 3 times. to
convolutely.
understand it. Yeah, but there, from what I've read, there's no maximum or minimum number of lots that I could find here so far, for whatever that's worth.
Okay, so let's ask a very simple question. Do you, as a group, think that the threshold to trigger open space set-asides in a subdivision should be 3 lots or more, 4 lots or more, or some other level or more? At what point is the interest of the town compared to the size of the parcel such that you want to compel an open space set aside? Right now it's at 4. Go down, go up, stay the same.
I vote for stay the same. I don't know of any reason to change it.
I vote for stay the same too. I don't see any reason to change it.
I myself would go to
concur.
3 because that's what our other regulation is.
You said 3, Ray?
Yeah, because that's what we have to call a subdivision.
Ray, I kind of agree with you, but the only thing I'm thinking of is it's 20%. The open space is 20%. And the thing that scares me is if you go down to 3 lots, 20% of the 3 lots
Yeah, you're getting
is
Yeah.
crap. You
Yeah.
know?
So what that means is that a minimum of 3 acres, right, for a minimum of 3 parcels. So
Yep.
3 acres could be no more. In order to have 3 lots, what is 3 80% of?
Yeah, I'm giving it to you for, what is it? I forgot.
What do you
43.
want, 20% of 3?
No, the other way around. 3 is 80% of what
560
number? In other
times-
words, what size parcel would you need in order to create a 3-lot subdivision?
You would have 104,000 square feet. That would be roughly 2.4 acres of buildable space.
No, that's still wrong. Hold on.
Really?
I think so.
Well, it's 3 acres,
Well,
right? You said 3 acres.
43 feet per acre times 3 is 130,680 square feet.
Yeah, that's what I
times
just
20.
did. And you want 80% of that because you only can build on 80% of the.
Yeah.
So my number's right. It's 43,500.
You would need 3.75 acres
Oh, to have 3.
to
acres
have
to build.
3-acre
acre.
lots.
Right,
That's
there you
the,
go. There you go. Yep. I'm doing it the opposite way. Yep.
right. Right. So it just means that you have to calculate your open space
Yeah, to get to 3 acres. Yeah.
to get to your three buildable acres. Right.
Yeah.
Mine comes up to 2.4. That's
Yeah,
all
you
right.
did the same thing I did. It's not 80% of the full value. It's actually 120% of 3 acres to get you back to 3 acres. You're giving 20% of it back, right? For open.
Yes. Yes.
So it's actually 1.2 that you have to times that by, not 8.8.
Correct. So, when you do that math, maybe that's not so bad, right? A 3.75 acre lot still can get you 3 lots, assuming that it's buildable otherwise, obviously.
Well, the real, I think the question I had is 0.7 of an acre
Worth it.
worth it?
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly it. Is it getting too small? And was the 4 lots in here specifically at a time when it was 2-acre lots?
Perhaps. So what would that, although it wasn't 2-acre lots everywhere, it was 2-acre lots in some places and 4 and 1-acre lots in other places, right? R40 and R80, that was the split.
Yes. But yeah, well, most of these subdivisions were,
I mean, half an acre is not that big, so I'm still for 4. That at least gets you, almost, what's 4 times 1.2?
I agree. 4 acres should be the,
That's almost an acre, of open space. It's 0.8, but
yeah. But I agree with Ray too. I mean, trying to keep everything as generic as, as standard as we can.
There is some appeal to that. And, it's not necessarily, I guess, again, if you think about the different kinds of open space, right? Yeah, 3/4 of an acre probably has little conservation value, but it could very much have recreational value, right? A 3/4 of an acre community garden, a 3/4 of an acre connection to a trail system. Those things could have value, or there's also the option of fee in lieu, right? Or
Yeah.
waivers if there's zero value to whatever that might be. Not that I would want to encourage waivers, but we certainly refer to them later on, and there are cases where it makes sense to have them,
Yeah.
right?
Where- Ray, where was the 3 noted before in another regulation? Did you say? I'm sorry if I was misguided there.
So 3 acres is for what it takes to become a subdivision.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Oh,
The
okay.
3
All right.
house lot.
All right. Okay. So you just mean to kick it off as a, okay, very good.
Right, I was just, trying to keep everything the same, so
Yeah.
everything coincides.
Yeah. You want a subdivision, you have to give us, some open space land, period. It starts right out of the gate.
Right, that's what I was thinking, that way there, everything stays the same all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm convinced of that. That's fine. I'm still, I could go either way with this one, but I do like, hey, you want a subdivision? Okay, boom, you got to give us some open space.
Like Tara said too, you could have a garden there, you could have, a little spot with swing sets or something like that too,
Yeah, I think it makes sense. That's fine with me.
Yeah, now that I'm listening to that, absolutely, that makes sense. 3 lots.
So
Instead
Tara,
of-
do you even have to call it out? Could you just put all subdivisions? They're
Yeah.
3 lots anyways, all subdivisions.
Yeah,
approved
you can
under
just
this-
delete it.
Yeah, I mean, if that ends up being the consensus, yes, it would just be all subdivisions because a subdivision is 3 lots or more.
Yeah. Okay.
Or
No,
a
a
And,
subdivision-
and wouldn't that simplify it?
Can I
Yeah.
interrupt here for a minute?
yeah, go ahead.
So a subdivision is 3 lots or more, but the only time you need a public hearing right presently is 4 lots or more. But if you take, you can have a free split, but if your property was subdivided before and and that's a re-subdivision, you want to do it in 2 lots. But a subdivision is 3 lots or more, even though our present regulations require a public hearing on 4 lots or more.
But I think
But-
even in those requirements, we may have already made the note to take that to 3 again, to make it consistent with the statutory definitions.
Okay,
And
Fine.
I would
Just
have to
gonna
go back and
recommend
look
that.
at that.
well, that's fine, but why, 3 lots or more is only, like somebody said, is only 3 acres. Why would you require open space land on 3 acres? I don't get it. That's just my personal feeling, so my input.
Well,
Right.
I mean, sort of for the reasons that we've articulated elsewhere in the attempt to preserve. And again, it might not have conservation value, but it might have recreational value for a neighborhood. But yes, it's still possible that 3 is as a threshold might not have much value. And you may find in that case that the commission would be more likely to have a waiver requested, which they could consider. But like I say, depending on how that land is configured, what it abuts, like maybe it abuts a Wyndham Land Trust property, and that extra 3/4 acres might not mean much in the subdivision, but could be adding to generally protected land. So the value is variable in terms of the,
Yeah. And if it just doesn't make sense, we still have the right to, say, all right, it's not required in this subdivision, right?
yes, you do have
Yeah.
options for waivers further down in the section.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I'm okay with the 3.
All right.
Or all subdivisions, whatever, all subdivisions.
Okay. And here's your general notes, Dave and Jane. that we were just going through. So here's the types of open space to be dedicated, and it has a whole long list. I would say it's pretty pretty well spelled out there. I don't think
Tara,
we
I've never been on one of, so who specifies what the purpose of the open space is, the developer or the commission?
Well, here, the dedicated use of the open space shall be indicated on the plan and shall adhere to one of the following purposes. So I would say that it's proposed by the applicant what the purpose would be. Now, because fundamentally a subdivision application is a form of special permit, the commission has the right to set conditions, meaning you can discuss that with the applicant and say, you know, you've proposed this, but we would suggest that you do this instead. But I think the initial proposal would almost certainly come from the applicant. Now, I can tell you in the case of large subdivisions where they tend to come into the office to discuss their plans first, some of that stuff might get hashed out between staff and the applicant before it ever gets to the commission, so that, you know, that value of what's being proposed, the logical question may have been hashed out ahead of time. I know that's definitely the case with some of the things we've seen recently. But yeah, I mean, the applicant is making their case, right? And you know, the commission can say, well, that sounds great, or that sounds hinky.
Yeah, I've never been involved, you know, in my short time here, I've never been involved in how it transpires.
I will say that we have discovered incidentally that some of the stuff that clearly seems to have been put aside for open space in decades past, I mean, I'm not talking about anything recent, was not necessarily as well recorded as it should have been. So part of, I think, what we want to get to here is making sure that those things are articulated. But in general, I think that the commission is more aware of and more responsive to those requirements anyway.
Yeah,
Historically, Kira, open space was used for tax purposes, less taxes.
Yeah.
but you know, if you're gonna put it on an easement or a deed, I think it needs to be spelled out and it needs the commission's approval to spell it out. I mean, we're not gonna,
I think that's further down in dedication of open space.
okay.
I think we're going to get there, and let's see if that's the case. Dan, by the way, if you're still on, if you have anything to contribute, just pop in at any time, since this is definitely a part of your wheelhouse.
Okay, you've stolen a lot of my talking points, but I believe you'll get to it later with the fee in lieu of open space. In areas where the size of the land doesn't make sense, sometimes the fee in lieu of open space adds up ultimately, and it becomes a worthwhile amount to actually use that fund for something. But we'll speak on other things further in the review.
Okay.
Tara, I got a question. Do you think we should call it conservation space instead of open space, so it doesn't get mixed up with the 490 with that type of open space?
Interestingly, I actually made that point in the section on conservation subdivisions, which we'll go back up to since I flipped it out of order. And I was reading it today, and I was less married to that idea, although I still think it's probably worth discussing. I certainly think that if the purpose of the particular piece of open space is as conservation land, it should be referred to in that way specifically. I don't know. I think you guys should probably chew on that a little bit. I do think there's merit to it.
I think there would be less confusion. I think that would make it simple if it was termed as conservation rather than open space. I think that would cause a lot less confusion.
But not
Or
all open,
conserve-
yeah, not all open space is conservation space. So let's go back to types of open space for a second. So some of these clearly are wetlands, scenic beauty, forest, field meadows, but parks, playgrounds, and other outdoor recreation areas or facilities are not particularly conservation land. They are definitely open space if they are so configured that they can never be otherwise developed. But if you are proposing as your open space, let's say it's a large enough subdivision that they would include like a soccer field area or something like that, or well, let's go back to the idea of a community garden. That community garden is cultivated space and it is open space, but you're not really conserving the natural landscape in that way. Same thing, I guess, with agricultural land, although you can certainly say you are, that's sort of a borderline area, since agricultural lands can be considered threatened lands, and you would be conserving them for that purpose. So that's sort of a borderline designation. I don't know, what do the rest of you guys think on that?
I monitor conservation easements, but I'm not involved in parks and playgrounds, open space deeds and such. So I think calling everything a conservation easement isn't necessarily, these are recreational easements versus conservation easements.
I do want to drop the question in again, and I know the question is elsewhere as well, but.
We can simplify it, call it what, Alvin? Protection. Protecting of open space, or protection of open space. That would separate it from conservation.
Yeah, I just brought that up because, somewhere down the line, somebody's gonna say, well, there's not 3 acres, or that, and, because of the 490 stuff that we're going through at the same time, that's the only reason why I brought that up.
Yeah, and of course, the unfortunate thing about going through the PA 490 thing at the same time is that they do use similar terminology, but in very different contexts. Okay, so I've got the note dropped there. Let's go back down. I know I have that same.
Terry,
Go
at the
ahead,
end of the day, it's all conveyed to the town anyways, right? So it doesn't.
Well, not necessarily, right? That was your earlier question. Sometimes it is conveyed to the town and sometimes it isn't conveyed to the town. But the point is that it is undeveloped in perpetuity, no matter which purpose it is dedicated toward.
Yep.
And that whatever happens, the deed should read what the purpose of the space is. And I know that that's addressed in here somewhere. All right, let's look at this stuff on calculations. Looks like calculation of, that's just a language thing. Access. Now here's an older note, and this goes way back to the first pass through, and it appears to be, and this is from Dave, recommend review with legal counsel about what level of improvement you can require from an applicant. I guess specifically in open space. Let's just read this. Open space dedicated for recreational purposes shall have access from a public street where such dedication is meant to serve the general public. Where such access is solely meant to serve residents within the development. Oh, this must be something I wrote. This is definitely not from the current, because I don't think there's anything like this breakdown in the current. Where such access is solely meant to serve residents within the development, access from a public street, private way, or right-of-way easement, shared driveway. That's grammatically incorrect. Here we go. Where such open space is solely meant to serve residents within the development, access shall be from. All right, let's try it again. Open space dedicated for recreational purposes shall have access from a public street where such dedication is meant to serve the general public. Where such open space is solely meant to serve residents within the development, access shall be from a public street, private way, or right-of-way easement, shared driveway. Such access shall be at least 50 feet wide and having a maximum grade of 10%, or shall abut existing open space having such access unless specifically waived by the commission due to the unique characteristics of the open space or subdivision. And Dave Held's comment from the first pass through is wondering what level of improvements can be required in open space. And I do not have the answer to that question. I'm looking at that 50 feet wide and wondering if that is, does that seem reasonable? It seems wide.
It seems large. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems large to me too.
I don't know what and how long is the access. Because then you're saying it's now having a maximum grade of 10% too. I don't know.
Pretty steep.
I'm also going to change street to right of way because a trail is not a street, but is a kind of right of way.
My take on the 50 feet wide is it might be for privacy purposes.
The access though, I could see if it was a buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the access sentences at all.
I think it's the access. I don't think it's just the width. So if you have to clear the trail or, I mean, you figure it's a walking path, right? So you're going to want to clear each side of it. I look at LaValley's and LaValley's got a 50-foot wide one. It is excessive. You know, I don't think 50 feet is correct either.
I think that's too wide.
We all seem to be thinking it's too wide, although I don't know what the correct width would be.
On our last week, we went with 20 feet for an access road for getting emergency vehicles in and stuff.
That is a good
Yeah.
point.
That was 12 to 20 feet. Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
So why
yes.
can't that,
Split the difference, make it 25 feet.
yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
And also, is the 50 feet related to the construction of a reference to construction of the road? Access shall be from a public street, private way, or right-of-way shared driveway. Such access shall be 50 feet wide. So is it more than a trail? Is it a road where vehicles need to turn around?
I would not think that we would be talking about a road built into the open space.
No,
To
I'm not
access the
getting
open
that
space.
either. I'm not getting that either. This is just access. It's not a road.
Yeah, I think it's just a cleared path. Let's call it that, right?
Yeah, good. Yeah, clear path.
Well, to read it again, access to this open space shall be from a public street. such access shall be at least. So I think it's referencing that the 50 feet needs to be the width of the public street or private right of way.
Yeah, I'm not getting that. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it has to do with the street. I think it has to do with the access, the path. It's not a road. And I don't believe that's in reference to the road. I think it might be just a typo area. 50 feet is very wide. Go with what Ray said. And then what Alvin said, split the difference, do it at 25 feet.
Well, it's-
Simplify it.
Yeah, it's almost certainly a carryover from the current, that sentence in particular, because if LaValley did his at 50 feet, I guarantee you, if it's as excessive as we all think it is, then the reason he did it was to conform to the existing regulations.
Yeah, it's a little wide.
And Dave, you think that looks wide on his plan?
Yeah, it looks wide when you go up there. Yeah. Oh,
All right, I'm gonna leave this note in here for 25 feet as possibly a more logical threshold. And obviously, you know, like everything else, it needs more discussion. So there may be somebody who's not here today who has an insight as to why that level was originally set. Maybe not. If nobody can identify the reason why it would have been put in there at 50 feet, I think we can probably safely knock that down.
Just one more thing here. This might be a dumb comment, but like, all right, so again, I'm gonna refer to my house, flag lot.
Yep.
The driveway entering has to be 50 feet wide, right? Not the driveway
Right.
itself, but the access has to be 50 feet wide for a flag lot. So is that the same here? It used to be 25 feet and then they changed it, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever, but
You mean the frontage requirement?
well, yeah, the frontage requirement, but that
Yeah.
frontage carries through the flag up till it becomes a flag lot. So it's 50 foot wide. That's where the
Yeah.
driveway lives.
That's in our zoning regs. Yep.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that's where that number is coming from. It says such access, right? That Dan's right. So that access is a public street, a private way, a right of way, or an easement. And I'm just looking at the word driveway, right? So it's 50 feet wide, that whole way.
Kind of defeating open space here.
Yeah.
A little bit.
With recreation, it seems to be this particular recreational purposes even should be listed here if we're trying to preserve open space.
You just lost a quarter acre of your 3/4 of an acre by making an access road.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah. Okay, so we've got this note that at least the people who are here tonight think that may be excessive. And when we bring this back to full discussion, like I say, if none of the guys who have been on the commission for decades, which is really John and Randy, can identify why that might have been chosen, I think we're well within bounds to knock that way down. And it's in at least, right? So if there's a circumstance where the design demands that it should be 50 feet wide, that's what's going to get proposed, right? If the logic of the design is such that a thing needs an entrance that is bigger, then that's what it'll be designed in. So this knocking your threshold down just gives the designer more options to fit the purpose of what's being proposed. That is the logic I am suggesting. Does that seem amenable?
If a waiver is in place already, it is about the logistics of the site, as you said. So any threshold there might not even be a requirement for the threshold unless that 50 feet is a requirement of driveways and roads. But otherwise, since you have a waiver in place, I mean, if you have a narrow winding road along a hill and there's nothing you can really do about it except for blow out the side of the hill, are you going to do that to preserve open space? So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we should be encouraging flexibility in design to get to the goal, right? And as you just said, if in order to meet a dimensional standard that we've put in there, we are degrading the actual open space that we're trying to preserve, we have accomplished nothing, right?
Precisely.
All right, so let's look at this. So here's one partial answer, I think, to your earlier question, Dave, and I think possibly part of Jane's question as well. Under B here, for open space dedicated for certain preservation and conservation purposes, public access may be, oh, this should actually be inappropriate. Public access may be inappropriate. In such cases, the area so dedicated shall be clearly indicated on the plan and shall be deed restricted in perpetuity. The town shall be granted rights for inspection and enforcement as needed. I don't think that fully answers the questions, but I think it's an element in that answer. All right, so condition. And we have a couple of questions here from Marla. So let's read the 3A. Any land to be dedicated as open space for the purposes of preservation or conservation of natural features shall be left substantively in its natural state by the subdivider. Such land shall not be graded, cleared, disturbed, or used as repository for stumps, brush, earth, building materials, or debris. Alterations which may be allowed include those which may increase public safety. Example, clearing of excessive dry brush during periods of drought or high fire hazard, or the clearing of invasive species from the area to be preserved. So Marla's comment is, what does substantively mean? I would submit that what substantively means is defined in the following two sentences. If anybody thinks that that is still unclear, let me know, because that means the language needs to be further adjusted. What is her other suggestion here? Recommend adding in the first sentence, or subsequent developer of any land in the subdivision, as the subdivider can sell the subdivision after it is approved and the new owners could claim to be that they are not the subdivider. Yeah, I think that that logic is compelling. Let's add that note. Any land to be dedicated as open space for the purpose of preservation or conservation of natural features shall be left substantively in its natural state by the subdivider or subsequent developer of any land in the subdivision. Okay. Or sub. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Kind of slams recreational use, though, doesn't it?
Well, this is just in referring to those types, right? For the purposes of preservation or conservation of natural features. So that could be, I don't know, we don't have any old growth forest in Thompson, but if we did have old growth forest and some of that old growth forest was on a parcel, you would want to preserve that as old growth forest. You wouldn't want to cut through that. I mean, there's almost no old growth forest left in all of New England, but that's a whole different issue.
Northern Maine, yeah, Northern Maine has it. I've been
That's
there.
true. That's true. Northern Maine definitely does. And Vermont still has some too, but surprisingly little, actually, because it was all cut up for agricultural purposes, you know, in colonial times and then allowed to reforest. But yes, you're right. Northern Maine certainly does. I think there's one stand of old growth forest left in all of Connecticut. Let's see, what is this note from Marlo? Who determines the allowance? Okay, so that is in response to this third question, third sentence. Alterations which may be allowed include those which may increase public safety, e.g. clearing of excessive dry brush during periods of drought or high fire hazard, or the clearing of invasive species from the area to be preserved. So Marla's question is, who determines when that is appropriate? And I do not know that I have a satisfactory answer to that either. I would say in the example given, the fire marshal certainly would have that authority. And invasive species can be identified. I don't know who would in particular make that identification.
I think invasive species is pretty much, it's either there or it isn't.
Well, correct. Yeah.
So on a conservation easement, any work that somebody would need to perform outside of what they're limited to in the easement, they would probably be going to the conservation agent to state their need to do such work if they knew that they had that restriction on the property. If they didn't, and in the course of reviewing the conservation easements, I found that they were doing something that they would need to, that's outside of the work, I'm thinking that I would say they need to come to me or have some kind of written plan and have an authorization from the conservation agent. If it were matters in,
good.
if it were matters in wetlands, it would be under the jurisdiction potentially of the wetlands agent as well, but dedicated as open space for conservation, that's a conservation easement to me.
Now, why don't you just add alterations which may be allowed, comma, via the AHJ, authority having jurisdiction. Includes, is that too broad? I mean, because that includes pretty much everybody. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad suggestion.
Yeah, let me look. Alterations which may be allowed includes those or the clearing of invasive species. Well, how about just what Dan just said? In the case of an area preserved under a conservation easement. That doesn't really deal with the dry brush. In the case of an area preserved under a conservation easement,
It only deals with,
plan to alter the open space shall be reviewed by the conservation agent. How does that sound?
What's the point of the review? Are they going to approve it or?
Yeah, so again, this is a very narrow set of circumstances, which has now 4 sentences describing it. It's describing land which is preserved for the conservation, or the preservation of natural features. In other words, we are not talking about recreation space, orchards, agricultural land. We are talking about pretty much conservation land. Shall be left substantively in its natural state. Exceptions to which are described, one being for public safety, and the other, which is a suggestion, I don't think that it's limited to this, the clearing of invasive species from the area to be preserved. since it's specifically talking about a conservation area, I think Dan's suggestion that that should be reviewable by the conservation agent is appropriate.
Kira, what if it's not, what if not, if the easement doesn't include the town?
That's an interesting question, and then let me pop that in here.
I like what you're doing. I don't know if it's, you know, if we're covered, if we're not, if the town's not listed under the easement.
Yeah.
I don't review Wyndham Land Trust easements. So Dave has a strong point there that the review by the conservation agent doesn't cover all the potential scenarios.
So maybe this is too specific and we need to get to something more like what Brian was suggesting.
What was Brian suggesting again? I'm sorry.
I was just saying, just say that the AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, rules on making what is allowed or not allowed. Again, it might be too broad, but I don't know. There's too many like randomness to this.
So I guess I'm going to go back to my original question. So what criteria does the conservation agent review it under? And then after the review, what authority or so what is it? What's the review for? If you're not, I don't understand. You're just sort of like it'll be reviewed by the conservation agent. Okay, great. Why?
Absolutely.
What's-
And
What
what
does he
rigor?
do with his review?
Yeah. One way of, not to answer Cindy's question, but to button up A here with the language that Tira just took off there, is if you had it dedicated as open space to the town for the purposes of preservation, but then you'd have to add additional sections, other areas of open space dedicated. But Cindy has a point there. What is the rigor of the review? And it would be case specific, based on, I don't think you can identify every single type of time somebody would want to come and get a review.
Yeah. It might be helpful, though, to delineate a couple of them as examples, which is sort of what I've now dropped up here. Because I think, for example, whether a land is public or private, the fire marshal may have the authority to recommend that clearing of excessive dry brush, right? If we're in a catastrophic drought at high fire hazard, does the fire marshal have the authority to recommend that brush clearing, whether it's a public or a private easement?
I would, that might be a legal question, but I believe that his authority would supersede the conservation agents, he's acting on his duties in that case. And if there was a challenge from the town against the fire marshal, that the fire marshal acting in his duties would exonerate him.
Alvin, Cindy, either one of you might have a better answer for this. What is the fire marshal's general right of entry? I know, for example, the health department has very little right of entry, but the fire marshal might have more. They go into private properties all the time.
Yeah, but it's on the public way. Like in a three-story building. He can only go
Three.
up and down the in between the different apartments.
The
He
common
can't really
space.
walk in. He cannot walk in on his own violation,
He has the right of way into multi-housing, 3 or more units.
right?
Yeah,
And the
I've
public.
never heard of a fire marshal going into a piece of property to look for dry brush on, even no matter how dry it is.
Okay, well, that's, yeah, so that's why we asked the question. So maybe. So let's look at this sentence again and try to see if our intent, I mean, I think the intent here is good, but do we have a mechanism to make that intent possible, I guess? Any land, such land shall not be, which may increase public safety.
It's publicly owned possibly, but not private.
So maybe just the answer is to be dedicated as public open space. Just add public here. Because we just might not have any right of entry.
That's
That
my
we-
fear.
Yeah.
If in the deed, the conservation easement spells it out that inspections are something granted to the town, there really isn't a differentiation be public-private conservation easement.
Ooh, I think you just landed on it, Dan, actually. That might be the answer. And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see that there's something like that a little further down, but okay, so let's just move on from that because I think we've got enough notes on that item. Open space for parks, playgrounds, or other outdoor recreational areas and facilities shall be provided in a condition suitable for the purpose intended. The commission may require such open space areas to be graded by the subdivider to properly dispose of surface water, that it be seeded with appropriate perennial grass, and that all brush and debris be removed. Such improvement of open spaces will not be required until the subdivision is substantially completed. What's Marla's comment here? Recommend adding or subsequent developer. Okay, that's the same note as above. And that is her only comment there. And nothing else flags on this for me. Let's just read it again. Open space for parks, playgrounds, or other outdoor recreational areas and facilities shall be provided in a condition suitable for the purpose intended. The commission may require such open space area to be graded by the subdivider or subsequent developer to properly dispose of surface water, that it be seeded with appropriate perennial grass, and that all brush and debris be removed. Such improvement of open spaces will not be required until the subdivision is substantially completed. That seems okay to me. Anybody, anything? Here's a will shall. Just reading Marla's comment here. Oh, but that is a language point, which I don't think really required. Well, may as well read it. Recommend change entire tract to all abutting tracts of the applicant. Also, what is the difference between a tract and a parcel? Neither term is given a definition in the regs. I do actually think they are fundamentally synonymous. If they are intended to mean the same thing, then global search and replace to use only one term and provide a definition for it. Otherwise, provide a definition for both and search the entire document to determine that each term is being correctly used. I think that is a language point that I can handle. I don't think we need to. I'll just confirm what the legal difference is, if there is any, between tract and parcel. I do not believe there is. I think we've actually asked that question before, but I'll go ahead and. All right, dedication of open space, and possibly this section answers some of the earlier questions again. So even though we don't have comments here, let's just read through it. Method of dedication. A, permanent dedication of each such area of open space shall be accomplished by 1, conveyance of fee simple ownership to the town of Thompson. 2, creation of a conservation easement in favor of the town of Thompson. 3, creation of a conservation easement in favor of the town of Thompson, reserving specific agricultural rights as approved by the commission. 4, conveyance of fee simple ownership to a tax exempt organization approved by the commission. 5, creation of a conservation easement in favor of a tax exempt organization approved by the commission. 6, conveyance of fee simple ownership to a Connecticut non-stock corporation of which all owners of land within the subdivision are members, along with a conservation easement in favor of the town over the entire open space area. Or 7, my favorite catch-all language, any other method which accomplishes permanent dedication in accordance with the requirements set forth in this section. Does that leave any stone unturned?
Well, this may be a foolish question, but on 3, specifically agricultural rights as approved by the commission, what commission? Agricultural Commission?
In
Planning
this
and zoning?
document, the commission, where it's used, is always referring to the Planning and Zoning Commission. If it was the Conservation, Inland Wetlands, or Agricultural Commission, that would be spelled out. And that is in the definitions.
Thank you.
So what is that agriculture rights? Who does that benefit?
So there is a form of conservation subdivision in which you can create either an agricultural commons, meaning all members of the subdivision or the subsequent development have rights to farm the land together. There's a big project that RC&D is working on in Lebanon with just that in mind, and they're scattered around. Or another possibility exists where the subdivider, so let's, a good hypothetical would be the O'Learys and Orrs. Now, what they've done is they've sold their development rights to the state for a good portion of their land, so it'll be preserved forever. Another strategy that they could have pursued if they wanted to subdivide part of it, but still maintain the agricultural function, was to be essentially the master owner of the full parcel, preserving a section for their farming, and then have the house lots off in another area. Right, so it's one master tract. That area for agricultural use, let's say it's plunked in the middle, and that would be preserved forever for that purpose according to that easement. But they could still monetize by selling off some house lots on the margin.
All righty.
I don't think that you're likely to see a lot of that, especially since the Orrs are our biggest agricultural landowner, and they have chosen to pursue a different strategy, which also preserves that in perpetuity. But it doesn't mean down the line that you know, heirs to the farm couldn't choose to farm on a smaller footprint and still make some room to subdivide. But that is what that is.
Okay,
Does anybody see any gaps in those methods of various methods of dedication of the open space? Dan, anything stand out to you there?
Not in particular.
All right, so B, the commission may require dedication of open space by methods listed in 1, 2, 3, or 6 of this paragraph. And the commission, that's weird language. I got to read this over. The commission may require dedication of open space by methods listed in 1, 2, 3, or 6 of this paragraph.
I'd use the heading.
Well, it was actually the "and" that was freaking me out. But let me drop that in here. Okay. Or the commission may require dedication by methods listed in 4, 5, or 7 with the mutual consent of the applicant. Okay, any such dedication, regardless of the method used, shall be completed prior to the endorsement and filing of the final subdivision plans in the office of the town clerk. Any conveyance of an interest in the dedicated open space shall convey to the grantee good and marketable title to the premises, and unless otherwise specified by the commission, shall be free of all encumbrances or defects. Clear as mud. So let's go back and look at the outline. The commission may require dedication of open spaces by conveyance of fee simple ownership, creation of a conservation easement, creation of a conservation easement reserving specific agricultural rights, conveyance of a fee simple ownership to, this is essentially an HOA.
I think it's all of that is the town of Thompson is in favor of town of Thompson, each of those.
Yes, okay, that's why. It's the reference to it, the town of Thompson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense then. But does the sentence make sense in general?
Yeah, I think that it does, because the other options involve creating organizations of homeowners or to a Wyndham Trust or everything but conveyance to the town.
Okay, all right. Okay,
It needs, the commission may require dedication by methods listed, blah, 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 with mutual consent of the applicant. So there's buy-in from both on what, the applicant specifies with the commission what the easement's going to be.
right, okay, okay. Okay, I'm comfortable with that then. All right, let's see where else we got here. Establishment of ownership and maintenance. Again, I don't have any comments from anybody here, but since some of the questions that have been raised, I think are related to this section, let's just read through it quickly. Where ownership and maintenance of the open space and or recreation area is to be transferred to an association of property owners, the document providing such transfer shall A, establish a mandatory participation in an association of property owners to maintain the land reservation for open space, park, playground purposes, and or agricultural production purposes, with power to assess fees to all members for all necessary costs to assure adequate maintenance. B, be binding on all future property owners. C, be perpetual and not affected by any subsequent changes in zoning or other land use regulations. D, provide that if maintenance or preservation of the dedication no longer complies with the provisions of the document, the town may take all necessary action to assure compliance and assess against the association all costs incurred by the town for such purposes, including any appropriate legal action. E, comply with the Connecticut Common Interest Ownership Act and other relevant state laws and regulations. And F, be filed by the subdivider with the town clerk after approval by the town attorney and the commission. I think this is actually establishment of private ownership and maintenance.
So so you're saying that this private contract between the owners of the subdivision, that agreement has to be approved by the commission?
Yes, and that is, if you look at places that do address home owner associations within their regulations, like anywhere where there's condos proposed or which is what it usually is in New England. But if you look around, then yeah, they all say that the form of the association has to be acceptable to the town before the whole schmear gets approved. And essentially that's the town saying, look, you guys are private owners, but the town does have interest in making sure its residents don't get screwed over.
Tara, in Windsor Locks, I've had to reference this on multiple occasions with certain homeowners associations. So I don't know if it's in Thompson's regulations, but it is a feature of regulations that the homeowners association mission is reviewed by the commission.
Reviewed
Yeah, I
or
was-
approved?
I
Ours
was
says-
just-
A part of the approval.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. So Tira, in the old regs, it says that the rights and duties created by such covenants or restrictions shall not in any way be modified or amended without the prior written approval of the commission. And that at any time maintenance, preservation, or use of such open space areas shall not comply with or fulfill the provisions of such covenant or restrictions, the town may at its election take any and all such actions, which I think it kind of says in there, as may be necessary or appropriate to assure and enforce compliance and to assess against the owners of land within the subdivision, either jointly or severely, all costs incurred by the town for such purposes. I think that in the old reg C needs to be back in here.
So that I don't have to have you repeat that whole thing again.
I'll do just C, that the rights and duties created by such covenants or restrictions shall not in any way be modified or amended without the prior written approval of the commission.
Yeah, that's fine, Dave, but all I actually really want, so that, you don't have to sit here waiting for me to finish typing, is the citation of the current, section, paragraph, whatever.
It's in the general C.
General C in which section?
Dedication of open space.
Okay. To the current dedication of open space.
So I guess if our town attorney is looking at this, I guess this is legal. But is this actually really legal? It seems like to me it's intrusive on a private organization. It's government in being intrusive on private organization. That's just my opinion.
Well, as we know, council's going to look over this whole thing at the end. I mean, we have a couple of things flagged where we know specifically council has to weigh in. Where does the authority of the commission end? I would say, as Dan just pointed out, this is consistent, or at least he seems to be saying that this is consistent with standards, for example, in Windsor Locks, where they probably have a lot more condos, right?
Right.
I'll give a recent example. So in Windsor Locks, there was, they call them storage condos, and they're owned by a home, essentially a homeowners association. It's not homes, but it's a condo association. And their original approval laid forth the build out. 2 buildings were built. There was a particular color scheme. Eventually, they wanted to build a 3rd building, and the board had changed. But in the design and the requirements that the commission had laid out for the original approval, things such as colors, materials, and those things were dictated in the charter of the homeowners association, and part of the approval process, like submitted with the approval in the approval process for the subdivision. I'm sorry, for the condo association, for this area that was going to be managed as a condo association. The language that is written here is kind of similar. I don't know if it's precise, if there's one thing or another that renders it legal or illegal, but effectively we had to enforce things like building height, color, that were part of the approval that for their build out was laid forth to the commission 20 years before. And we were brought into the homeowners, the association's internal conflicts as a legal party and forced into this position. But as Cindy said, it needs review by the town attorney. I just know how we worked with what we had in Windsor Locks, and it might not be exact to what you have there.
Yes, and review by town council is definitely a part of this process. I was just sitting here trying to remember at what point we sent it over with the zoning regs. And I think it was after we completed the draft that then went out for final public comment. In other words, before it was presented for public comment, we made sure that all of the language was legal first. I'm pretty sure that is the order of action that we took. So when we are done with this second pass through, that would be what I would do, assuming that language again then is legal and doesn't require any interim adjustment for those purposes. This V2 draft gets published for public comment so that those can come to me so that I can compile the final discussion guide, which would include any of the remaining comments that we're keeping track of in the marginal notes here that we can't resolve in, with consensus in discussion, plus any of the concerns brought forth from the public. That worked pretty well with the zoning regulations. I actually got, a few pretty good comments from the public, and it informed the final document for sure. And then after that review period, it would be the discussion guide plus the draft goes to the full commission for discussion in a regular meeting. And then the public hearing process, yada, yada. I think that mirrors what we did before. So. And I am quite certain that I did not make up these bullet points on my own. So I either pulled them from an example document in the state or possibly possibly a legal guidebook. But I feel like I took a lot of this kind of stuff from Killingly because I was referred to Killingly as having good language on HOAs and stuff. But it was a while ago, so I won't say I'm 100% on what my source was.
Tara, my comment is down in general, so you don't even have to. I'm sorry, I was a little bit ahead of you.
Oh, so that C is down here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can pull this comment out. All right.
But I do want to say that where we are. The document should assure, it was written before assure adequate maintenance. I think that assure adequate maintenance above in the conveyance of the method of dedication. Yeah, method of dedication.
Mhm.
So I think the ownership of the maintenance of the open space. So this document should include assured adequate maintenance.
And
So
we
it's
don't think it
down.
says that somewhere else?
No.
I
'Cause
guess
it's right-
not if we're saying this is just private ownership and maintenance.
Dedication of open space. Well, especially in this, especially in,
So where are we thinking this
Private.
goes now? Well, it's in private. I mean, the whole thing essentially establishes the standards for appropriate maintenance, don't you think? Well, maybe it doesn't.
the old regs had assure adequate maintenance. I think that legally that if it's written in the document,
It says it in number A.
Yeah, it says it right there in A. Shall A establish a mandatory participation in an association of property owners to maintain the land reservation for open space, park, playground purposes, and or agricultural production purposes with power to assess fees to all members for all necessary costs to assure adequate maintenance? Or are you
okay,
saying
yeah,
that
yeah,
that?
no, you're good.
Okay,
You're
okay.
good, sorry.
No, I just want to be sure that I'm not misunderstanding you.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to go back and forth between the two.
All right, so where were we here? This is a note of mine, and this is just something I have to ask Halloran and Sage, like what is the actual difference between a non-stock corporation and a homeowners association? Are those synonyms? Does one behave differently from another? Because that non-stock corporation gets referred to a lot, but it always seems to me like it's talking about homeowners association or property owners associations more appropriately. So I need a legal answer on that. We can't resolve that here. Unless somebody here actually has the legal answer, in which case, yay. This was just a comment I had on delineation and marking of open space. The commission may require the applicant to post identification plaques each 50 feet along the edge. I had said that seemed awfully excessive. But Marla thinks that that is the appropriate standard.
And I concur too, Jared.
Okay, all right. It seems so, I mean, if you're talking about a big parcel of land, that's a lot of little plaques, but.
It's so you can identify it in the field. It's like trail markers, in a sense, so you can
Okay.
clearly identify the boundary. So you, if it were 500 feet, you could walk off 500 feet in one direction and not know what if you're walking the boundary.
Okay, all right, that makes me feel better about it.
I think that's the same classifications for posting a property, to post it for no trespassing. I think it's supposed to be every 50 feet too.
Okay. All right, both of those things make me feel better about that. Okay, legal transfer. I have no comments from Marla. And again, I think that that is something I need actual legal confirmation of. Banking open space, which is another strategy similar to fee in lieu. I just have this one comment from Marla that maybe public utilities is too broad a statement since our only actual public utilities are water and sewer. I mean, it might not be that way in perpetuity, I suppose. I don't know. I'm kind of comfortable with leaving that as access to public utilities as the general standard. The purpose of banking open space shall be to encourage increased preservation of open space in outlying districts while permitting increased density in districts where access to public utilities makes such density feasible. So in other words, if you are proposing a subdivision in the Mill District, instead of putting aside, say, a 20% set aside for land that connects to nothing or might not have any particular value as open space, you could bank it and increase your open space in a subdivision in the RRAD. That's assuming that you own or sell it to someone else to do just that. Again, I don't think this is something you would see a lot of, but it is something that helps drive development where you want it as opposed to where you don't want it. But the specific comment is whether public utilities is too broad a term. I kind of think it's okay.
No objection from me.
Yeah, okay. Fee and lieu, we talked about a little bit, and I don't think I have any, I think this is more or less peeled directly from what we currently have. I know Carolyn thought that this was a very valuable way, again, to get the open space that you want without forcing it on subdivisions where it doesn't make any sense, so.
Absolutely, I agree too.
Yeah.
Sarah, that's at 100 feet for the no trespassing signs. I just asked my phone.
Okay. But Dan, you still think the 50 is good, or would you be comfortable with 100 feet? I'm just thinking of like on a huge property, how many little signs you'd see. It just seems so, seems like a
The
lot.
other day I did hand out a stack of 20 of them. And it was for not the hugest piece of land. I'd like to, while you guys continue on, I'll do a cursory look of see where I can find this regulation elsewhere to see if that 50 is customary or if it varies.
And it says may, we may require.
I
or the
suppose that's
commission may
true.
require.
And
It's not set in stone.
it's never 50 exact feet. I mean, it's where approximately where it makes sense, posted on a tree or a post, but not, I mean, they could be demonstrated on a plan and with high accuracy, but I don't think it's a requirement of the conservation easement to be so precise. But 50 feet might be language that's in typical deeds that I'm finding, or the conservation easement language. I'm sorry.
All right,
But,
well, if you can
yeah.
find some examples next week, just so we can see if we are consistent with other area towns and their requirements. You know, we want it to be the appropriate amount of work for all parties. You know, not excessive. for
Absolutely.
anyone. So. All right, we were down here. This is just a language thing, which I will go ahead and take care of. Open space waivers. And again, here's that 3 or 4. Were we leaning towards 3 before? I kind of feel like we were.
Yes.
Yeah. Standardize it.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Where the subdivision is to contain affordable housing as defined in Chapter 126, Section 8-39A of the Connecticut General Statutes, equal to 20% or more of the total housing to be constructed. That isn't even a sentence. I hope I didn't write that incomplete sentence. Where the subdivision, oh, because it's a condition from up here. All right, that's why. Scoop, scoop, scoop. Open space waiver. The commission shall require open space in all subdivisions of 3 lots or more, or shall require a fee in lieu of open space for all subdivisions as described in these regulations. No waivers of this requirement shall be granted except in the following instances, okay, as specifically required by Chapter 126, Section 8-25 of the Connecticut General Statutes. And there's comments here just on number 2. Where the subdivision is to contain affordable housing as defined in Chapter 126, Section 8-39A of the General Statutes, equal to 20% or more of the total housing to be constructed in such subdivision. Such restrictions for affordable housing shall be evidenced by such documents as the commission may require, and such restrictions shall run with the lots affected thereby in perpetuity. If subsequent to approval of the subdivision, the lots designated for affordable housing shall not be, oh, okay. That is just a language piece. All right. I thought she was saying the level of requirement. The commission may, following the violator. All right, those are language things. Commission determines subsequent to the approval. That's a check citation. Okay, so that's the basic open space stuff, and I think that we've gotten through it. So now we're going to go back up to conservation subdivisions. Let's see if we can bang through this, even if it gets a little over 9, just to get the shape of this. And again, my initial thought was to lead with the conservation subdivision and then go to open space, but I do actually think, having read it again this afternoon, that the open space is the general, and then the conservation subdivision is a subset of open space. But what I do think, and this is for later discussion, is we could promote these sections to earlier in the document to indicate that they are important for developers to think of earlier in the process. We don't have to resolve that now, but I just want to, again, toss that concept out. All right, so Section 7, conservation subdivisions. And I'm going to read all of these little marginal notes because this is stuff I carried over from both me and Carolyn. As I think I've mentioned before, this was actually the last thing that Carolyn and I worked on together before she got too ill to continue. And this stuff was very, very important to her. So I want to be sure that we are acknowledging, and I don't know which of these comments are hers and which ones were mine, but it was from our back and forth. Okay, as discussed in the Plan of Conservation and Development, smaller acreages should be considered for conservation subdivisions, meaning smaller than what we're already proposing, which is 30,000 square feet, particularly where they may connect with other protected land. How small could a parcel, an open space parcel be and still have practical conservation value? And we've already talked about that a little bit. In order to make a clear distinction, protected land in a conservation subdivision should be referred to as conservation land as opposed to open space required in a conventional subdivision. And that point was raised earlier tonight as well. Conservation subdivisions should have a clear percentage of the parcel to be dedicated as conservation land. Logically, that percentage should be higher than that required for a conventional subdivision. Woodstock requires 40%, and some towns require 50% in order to qualify. In our first pass, we did set that level. Right now, it stands at 35%, and we may want to look at that. In order to allow more flexibility in the configuration of the lots, a revision could be considered to allow up to 60% of the conservation land to be wetlands or watercourses, depending on its demonstrated value for conservation. Minimum lot sizes should be reduced even further to allow developers more opportunity to monetize their parcels while preserving a greater percentage of the remaining open space. On the developable land, the standard for lot sizes could be set as the minimum which satisfies the NDDH standards for septic and potable water. Dedicated conservation land should have an attendant conservation easement in favor of the town. I think that is addressed a little bit later, clearly stating the purpose of the conservation land and the allowable and disallowable activities. It is beneficial to the town to have the conservation land remain in private ownership. Therefore, a provision regarding the establishment of an HOA for the development could be considered. This would also be consistent with the preference for shared driveways and subdivisions maintained in association, yada, yada, yada. So these comments were all before the first pass. I think some of them are at least partially addressed in what you have here, which is the language after the first pass. So let's dive in and see what we've got. So again, here we have our 3 or 4 threshold. Let's just go ahead and change that to 3 for now. An applicant proposing a subdivision plan of 3 or more lots may submit such plan as a conservation subdivision. A plan for a conservation subdivision shall meet the requirements of this section, as well as all other relevant provisions of these regulations and the Thompson zoning regulations. The Commission recommends that prior to the submission of an official application for conservation subdivision, the applicant initiate a pre-application conference for informal consideration by the Commission. The presentation of a preliminary conservation subdivision plan will better facilitate alterations recommended by the Commission. Neither the pre-application conference nor the consideration of the preliminary plan shall be deemed to constitute the official procedure of subdivision approval. So just to put this in a little context, you know, I've been alluding to, and I don't want to allude too closely to them again because I don't want to be prejudicial. We've had probably 3 or 4 developers come in now with some plans for some larger parcels. And what I have started to do with them, similarly to this, you know, informal presentation to the Commission, which you've also started to see some of, is to sit down with those developers and do what we're calling a green line, which is looking at the parcel, not just identifying the constrained lands, in other words, where they absolutely can't build, but what would be the desirable open space portion, and then recommending that they fit their subsequent layouts to that portion. And so what we're coming up with, or what we have seen happen, is that we are getting set-asides that are ranging between 40 and 60% in these concept plans. So I just wanted to toss that out there as to what you can actually accomplish, you know, with that kind of stipulation. Interrupt me at any point here, by the way. Okay, so here we have
Gary, you said 30 to 40% is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying we're seeing 40 to 60%.
Okay.
I might have said 30, but I meant 40.
That's why I might have heard you wrong. That's fine.
No, you probably didn't. I probably tripped over myself because, you know, numbers. Because when you look at the, and actually some of those links I sent you guys, you'll see that they describe this principle, right? If you start with the character of the parcel first, then it becomes easier to design, whether you're talking about the full acre minimum or the reduced minimum, it becomes easier to see a more favorable layout as opposed to the idea of just flattening the whole thing, plopping the lots on. And then, you know, even if you've got open space set aside, it isn't really the contours that it was before. You know, the woodlot's all gone. Yeah, it may be open space. It may have been seeded. It may have been grassed. It may be set aside, but what's the value, right? So it's identifying the value of the parcel itself before you even talk about the house lots.
Yeah.
So here's the nitty and the gritty is your dimensional requirements. And there's that where we currently are, right? The minimum lot area that we talked about in the first pass was 30,000 square feet. And really the only alternative that you can suggest is that language, which opens it up to the minimum that NDDH will approve. You're almost never going to get below 30,000 square feet anyway, but you may have some instances, if you have appropriately draining soils, where you could get down to a half acre. That's an incentive to a developer to build on those good draining parcels to get more lots. So I've advocated for that all along, and I just want to toss it out to you guys again. You know, Ray had not been a part of that initial conversation because that was before that election. So there you go, discuss. Nobody has anything to say?
Only thing I have to say is I'm just processing it in my head.
Did I lose Santos? Oh, I
What?
think I just noticed, I think Santos dropped off. Hold on. one
No, I'm
sec.
here. I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, I don't see you on my screen.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay.
The 30,000 we've talked, I think we've talked about this before. I don't.
Yeah,
have-
we
I-
did. I'm just tossing it back out. That's all.
Yeah.
That's exactly what is in the old regulations. 30,000 in the conservation subdivisions. It's 30,000 square feet, 100 linear feet.
Yeah, the only thing that changes the net buildable area isn't listed as 30,000 square feet.
What do you have for net buildable area?
There's
Well,
nothing.
we've peeled
I
the
don't think there
concept
is.
out,
Yeah, there's,
Filled it out.
at least
Oh.
temporarily.
yeah, there's nothing. My only comment here is 3 should be impervious, not imperious.
Oh.
Right.
Yep.
It makes a good visual though, the imperious surface. Maybe imperial.
Yeah, really.
I mean, if this is the standard where we want to leave it, it's fine. We'll move on. I just wanted to once again toss that possibility out. Not because I think you would see a lot of opportunities for lots to go below 30,000 square feet. But again, keeping the concept of flexibility in mind for the most favorable clustering in order to preserve more space. But if we're happy with this, we can move on.
Yeah, why don't we leave it there until we get to the full commission?
Okay.
Tira, I've just one comment on the number 3, 20% of the impervious surface on a 30,000 square foot lot. That's 6,000 square feet. That's a hell of a lot of space. I'd like to see it, 12% max, not 20. That's only my suggestion.
What was it before?
I think this is
20%.
exactly as it is now.
It was 20%.
I don't see any reason to change it, but you make a good point, Alan. It is 6,000. That's a lot of square footage, but I don't see any
6,000
reason.
square feet. You got a
Yeah.
3,000 square foot home. Yet you can have 6,000 square feet of impervious land. Woo, where are they going to put the septic?
So what did you think was a good threshold, Alvin?
I'm
12?
thinking 12%, yeah. That's only me.
Well, we'll include it as a note.
I like to look that up and see what other towns have. That's for
Okay.
sure.
12% makes, 3,600 square feet.
Alvin, they need that for the snow storage, so they don't plow it in the road. I've been waiting for that.
Yeah, tee that up, Brett Poplowski. Tee that up.
Snow storage has got to be on. Impervious.
That was good.
He's
That's-
right though, Dave. Your snow storage, you would want it to be on pervious surface so that it could infiltrate. So
Now throw the snow in the road.
we're going to take all the snow to Alvin's house.
Yeah.
All the snow in the town of Thompson. The cul-de-sacs thing with this little time in the hour, again, we can't even really talk about it. I feel like we're going to have a whole evening to talk about cul-de-sacs. And the only other thing that I'm going to introduce in this is that, we've talked a lot about why they're good, why they're bad. When Janet and I did our little arts and crafts session a couple of weeks ago, where she printed out a bunch of 24 by 36 plot plans, and we cut out little shapes for house lots and did green lines and did samples of road configurations. What we came up with that serves some of the same functions as a cul-de-sac, but was not as horrible from either a plowing or a visual standpoint, was the idea of a loop road. And again, I think I need to sort of draw some out, and maybe we just need a whole separate discussion just on these kinds of configurations. But the loop road would essentially be a two-way in out, right, at your entry point with your road frontage for the subdivision, but then splits off to a one-way that goes around the subdivision with houses on both sides potentially. So you're still sort of going in that, you still got the one ingress egress point to the connecting public road. But it's a reduced amount of pavement because it's only one lane after you get past the two-way ingress egress, right? So you're reducing your overall pavement profile. And then one-way streets are inherently sort of safer than two-way streets in residential developments because you've only got traffic coming from one direction, and you can meander them more. So you get that, Alvin talks about country lanes, right? You can really loop around the property. And then they come out again into the two-lane, back to the connecting collector street. When Jan and I were sort of doodling them out, they really looked sort of nice in that rural sense. You're able to follow land contours. If you're, again, only having sort of the one lane of traffic, you can fit it in a narrower space, move your properties around. I think we need more time to discuss it, but I'd like to discuss it with you guys at a session coming up. I'm not really sure how to fit it in, but I don't know, Dave, this is your chance to pull out your shiv.
I was waiting to hit on mute. So I'm familiar with that concept. And I agree with you. It works in a private or an HOA, you know, and I'll give you an example. If you want to drive up to Webster, up to Blueberry Lane. You have a greenway in between the one ways that has to be maintained. So, you know, I think it works on an HOA. I don't see it working on a town accepted road because the town isn't going to want to go up there and mow the grass in between two one-way streets.
A lot of the things I think that we propose work better with the HOAs, which is part of the reason we've been talking about them so much. Also, as we have repeated, or I shouldn't say we, as I have repeated, because I am so aware of it. Anything that encourages the construction of the private road with the less pavement that takes the burden off the town, the financial burden off the town just for the road maintenance, I think deserves consideration. It's something of an exaggeration to say it keeps me up at night, but you know, in a figurative sense, it kind of does. You know, that $1.625 million that we should be putting aside every year for road maintenance, and we never have and never will. The more public roads we have, the more underwater we get. So if a way to sort of bring these concepts in is to allow a developer to spend less on asphalt, still get the number of lots and get the larger open space profile, I feel like that's a win for everybody. But
It is. I just don't see HOAs taking off here.
Maybe
my
they
personal
won't,
opinion.
you know, all we're doing is creating the circumstances under which a developer can propose something. We
Yep.
can't force them to propose anything, right? If they bring a legally conforming conventional subdivision plan to the commission and it fits the regulations, the commission is obliged to approve it. But if we don't give them the options to consider, you're not going to see them at all.
Yeah, that we agree on. Was I muted?
No.
Oh.
No, I was allowing you to say that we agreed, and I was not contradicting you. Separate meeting. I don't know. Anybody else? Ray, Brian, Alvin? Anybody else want to weigh in on the thorny topic of cul-de-sacs?
I'm letting the Shiv master go at this one.
I should point out that I actually did partly grow up on one when I was young and living in Plymouth. I remember the bulb being massive. Of course, I was young, right? So everything looks bigger when you're young. But we were living in Plymouth, Mass, during the blizzard of '78. And I remember all of that snow. It had to have been piled up 8 and 10 feet in some places. It was crazy. Now, when I was 8 years old, let's not pretend I was paying attention to how much work the plow guy had to do. But I can envision it now, right? In this context going, what a waste of a plow guy's time.
68 was even more snow than 78. You weren't around then.
Alas, Alvin, that predates me by a couple of years.
I just, you know, I look at Blackmere Downs, I look at these cul-de-sacs that have been there for 25, 30 years. They're in better condition than our road that just got paved last year. And I'm sure Ray can attest to that. He's got landmines before he gets to his driveway.
Yeah, I call them speed bumps. It's speed control. But when they did, I'll tell you that this ain't a place to talk about it, but when they did redo this road, it washed my driveway out. I lost 75 bales of hay to mold this year because of water going into my barn, into the garage. You know, I still had my daughter's hay here. And we lost 75 bales because of the way that this road was was pitched when they redid it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that roadway restoration process has a lot to be desired. I don't, maybe there's a good way to put asphalt back down and grind it up and mill it and put it back down. I haven't seen any of our roads successful with that operation yet.
As Ray points out, it's a tangential topic to this, but just for my own curiosity, was that pre-Rich Benoit?
Yes,
Was it?
I thought it was.
What's it, 3 years, Ray?
I think it might have been 4 or 5, no?
Yeah, what was he, 8, 9 years here?
Oh, okay, so I guess it wasn't.
Rich? I don't think Rich was here 8 or 9 years. I mean, I'll
No,
be here 3 as of April. And Rich
I
was
think
still
Rich-
relatively new. I think he was here 4 years, maybe.
Rich came in after I came in, and I've been here for 4.5 years.
Leo Adams.
But
was
anyways,
ambassador prior to Richard.
but I mean, it was before him they did it, and they did it under his watch too. But I look at these cul-de-sacs here, and you go up to, Blackmere Downs, beautiful houses, beautiful road, plenty of, nobody complains about the snow. I think it's either way, private, public, but I think that cul-de-sacs can be accepted as roads if they're done correctly. And
I don't think Liberty Lane's ever been repaved since that was put in, and look at how long that's been there. That cul-de-sac's been there, it's gotta be 25 years.
Yeah. I mean, even Madison Avenue, there's what, 15, 20 building permits up there for $500,000 houses. Once it's done, I mean, Rich signed off on it. I know there's speculation about it's not right. It's, the catch basins are wrong, the berm's wrong, blah, blah, blah. Rich signed off on it, said the drainage is good. Obviously there's a problem down at Thompson Road, but you look at a cul-de-sac and what it can bring in if it's done properly. The roads we're repaving are the roads that we've redone and are the old school roads. That's my 2 cents, Brian.
The only way to do anything, I feel, at the end of Madison Avenue, there'd have to be a drain across the whole bottom of that, because there's no way to stop the water from coming down the pitch of that hill.
No, too steep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the state doesn't want to hear anything about it.
but that's the only way to fix that water going across 193 in my eyes.
Yeah. But I mean, you've been up there, Ray. Those houses are beautiful up there.
Oh, yes, they are. Yep. No, there's no doubt about it. I take a ride up there once a week just to watch the people at the sidewalks.
So let me ask you guys this, which is just a very simple question. Once we get through the first pass or this second pass, would you guys be willing to have one more just separate topic on these things? Or maybe we don't need to. Maybe I'm just fixated on this issue because again, I have that road maintenance budget in the back of my head. I do have problems with the idea that they are not connecting anybody to anything, right? So they really are, even if we're publicly maintaining them, they really are private, right? It's the only people who go on them are the people who live there, as opposed to any other connecting road where if you don't live on it, you may have a reason that you're driving on it, and therefore it is the general public good. And I recognize that I'm a little fixated on it, but they also contribute to what we think of as suburban sprawl, which, if we're talking about like conservation and preservation of open space and not like bleeding out and endlessly into the lands that, most of us, if not all of us, have variously said we want to keep more intact. Those are the things that bother me about them. But I acknowledge people often say they like to live in them. They perceive them to be safer. There's some evidence that is not as true as people think it is, but perception means something. I don't know. Maybe we don't really need, maybe just when we get into the appendices with the road standards, that'll be enough. But
you got to think about what Dave brought up a couple of weeks ago. If we have these private roads and they're taking care of their own roads, should they be paying, the same mill rate that the rest of us are paying on their property?
I did actually look into that. I asked the assessor if there was a way to make that adjustment, and there is not. There is no statutory authority for that. But the other point is that aside from the single road on which you live, as a resident of Thompson, you are using all of the other public roads. So you
Right,
still
right.
have a tax burden. It's just that this one section of road is just yours.
No, I'm not against growth and all of that, but if we have all these houses coming into town and there's people coming in here with 2 and 3 kids, and they're paying $4,000 to $5,000 a year for taxes on their house, and it's costing us $30,000 a year per student in our school. That's going to bring up the rest of our taxes to pay for these other kids to go to the school here. And, that kind of sits in the back of my mind. I know that has nothing to do with what we're doing now, but it's still something to think about with bringing in, a lot of subdivisions.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a separate topic. The school and the tax rates according to the school in an undersubscribed system, which is what we have. I mean, our capacity is about twice what we have for enrollment. It's not an exact one-to-one relationship, but at some point, adding students reduces the cost per student. It amortizes better, but it's not one-to-one, right? There are things that skew that, and the thing that skews it most notably is special education needs. But that's not necessarily something you can control with subdivisions.
Tara, I have encountered Connecticut Office of Legislative Research.
Mhm.
They've noted a study with a 20% increase in value for property adjoining or fronting a passive use park. And as well, that these types of properties attract somebody willing to spend more. I think I did find a study.
I think we actually cite one of those studies in the Plan of Conservation and Development under the section on recreation, maybe.
So maybe these properties are worth more and get taxed at a higher rate. I don't know the dynamics of that. But there is the cost of community services to be considered. And if the goal is to conserve open space, that anything towards the residential type of development is just a loss of open space. But private property, this is an option, I think, an interesting potential market too.
Yeah, one thing I do feel that we're all fairly consistent on is wanting to preserve more green space by a number of different mechanisms. I don't think there's anybody on the commission, on staff, who thinks we should be unnecessarily fragmenting our remaining green space, whether that be woodlots or agricultural lots or wet areas or whatever.
I totally agree. I think that, our forefathers with the lot sizes that were proportionate, 20, 30 years ago with the minimum lot sizes, they were trying to conserve land back then. So fundamentally, nothing has changed. We're just getting creative on how we do it now. That's my take on it.
Well, I'll go one further on that one, which is that, and this is the perception piece that I think is a hard hurdle for some folks, but we've seen the demonstration, right? The sort of the math of it, that there's a perception that larger lots preserve more open space, but it's fundamentally untrue. If the large lots themselves, the owners of the large lots don't agree to preserve that space, right? Once you sell it for development, and you see these developments all over the place, there's not a tree on it, right? It's just flat lawn, and maybe it's 2 acres of it. The larger the house lot, in most cases, the larger the house. So the larger the carbon footprint, the larger the energy needs, all kinds of stuff like that. Whereas, and I can probably find it again, we might even be, I think we're through all the, yeah, we're actually through all the comments. So let me save this and stop share.
The preference is always for functional open space. Fragmented, non-contiguous open space is worthless to have. It would have been better to get the money than to have the worthless open space.
So, and I know I showed this before, but just again, as a reminder, because there's nothing like a good visual. Why is that not? Hold on. It's behaving badly. Oh, I see why it's not. I didn't open it properly. You guys have that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So again, there's something here we're never going to achieve, right? Which is this one down the bottom, because we're not going to be able to get lots this small in the town of Thompson, except where
Public water.
we've got public water. But it's still an interesting contrast, right? Here's your conventional yield, right? 2 acre minimums. In this instance, there's no open space set aside. There appears to be open space here. These are constrained lands. This is wetland. You know, this happens to be wooded, but if this is unpreserved as open space, there is nothing from stopping any of these people from knocking every one of these trees down. They would have every right to do it. So, and that's at these 2 acre minimums. So there's no inherent preservation of open space just because the lot size is large.
Right.
There is an inherent preservation of open space if you reduce the lot sizes and raise the requirement for the open space. And if you reduce it enough so that the developer can get a few extra house lots out of it, there's your win-win, because you get more undivided. And I think this was the closest we could get to something you would see in Thompson in terms of a profile. You know, the town benefits from getting more open space. The developer benefits from being able to get more house lots. And if you tweak your road standards so that they can be a little narrower to reduce the pavement profile, he saves costs. Because the developer can sell more lots and potentially reduce costs elsewhere, the housing costs themselves get reduced for somebody buying. So, you know, from just sort of an overall math perspective, I think that math works better for everyone. You know, we can't get to this figure 12. There's no physical way for us to do it in our outlying districts. Maybe in the Mill district, if you know you've got a large enough parcel, and there are a couple that are big enough to do that on, you know, applying these principles. But to me, this is significant, right? The difference between this figure 7 and either figure 8 or figure 9. I mean, figure 8 has the same number of lots, smaller. And again, this is showing 50% undivided open space, meaning preserved in perpetuity. This one goes even smaller, so you could get a boost to your number of lots, but you've got 60% undivided open space. To me, that's a real benefit to the town. And as we've said with a couple of other things, a developer's not going to propose something he doesn't think he can sell. Right? If he doesn't think there's a market for it, he's going to come back in with the larger lot sizes anyway. But if he thinks there's a good market for the smaller house lots, then why not give him the flexibility to do it? And also from a housing stock perspective, what we've heard over and over again is, downsize housing and starter housing. And those are two things that are in short supply in Thompson. And that is much easier to do on a smaller lot than on a larger lot. And it's a serious consideration when you consider how rapidly our population in Connecticut in general, and Thompson is consistent with those trends, is graying. It's just a fact. Our only growth demographic is the retiree crowd projected over the next 10 to 20 years. So it's just stuff to think about. All right, it's 9:20. I kept you guys after time. You guys are troopers. Did anybody have anything else before we wrap for tonight?
Good night. I'm exhausted.
Night,
Yeah.
everyone.
No, I'll get
Have a
this
good one.
probably back to you guys by Monday. I think tomorrow I'm too tied up, but by Monday.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Good night.